My name is Claire Whitfield. I am 34 years old, and I can walk into a dining room and tell you whether it will make money that night. It is not a magic trick. It is the spacing of the tables, the way the host holds the book, whether the server station is stocked before the first seating or halfway through it. I have spent 12 years learning to read a room the way a farmer reads a sky. So on the second Friday in October, when my sister sent me a screenshot of a reservation confirmation with the words, "Engagement dinner, be there, wear something nice," I did not look at the date first. I looked at the restaurant Marchetti's, table 9, 7 o'clock, party of 11. I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and looked out the window at the parking lot for a while, because my sister had just booked her engagement dinner at a restaurant she believed I worked at, and she had booked the largest table in the house, and she had not asked me a single question about it first. She did not know what I actually was to that building. Nobody in my family did. That was my own fault, and I had a long time to think about exactly how it had become my fault. What I did not know yet, sitting there watching a maple tree drop leaves onto somebody's windshield, was that my father had already called the restaurant twice that week. Once to confirm the table. Once to ask a question about the bill that the manager would later repeat to me word for word, standing in a service hallway with his hands in his apron pockets, looking like a man who had been asked to lie and had decided not to. Welcome back to Evelyn's quiet table, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity intact. If you have ever been the one expected to pay, to fix, to stay quiet, pull up a chair, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from, and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up 2 years. Before the toast, before the ledger. Before I said 4 words to a man named Marcus and changed the whole shape of my family in the time it takes to fold a napkin. What they think I do, me family thinks I am a hostess. I want to be precise about this, because it matters later. They do not think I am struggling. They are not cruel in the obvious way, the way that leaves marks you can point at. They simply decided somewhere around 2014 what my life was, and then they stopped updating the file. Here is the version they carry around. Claire went to community college. Claire waited tables at a place on Route 9 that had a fish tank in the lobby. Claire never finished the 4-year degree because she got distracted by work. Claire is doing fine, sweetheart. She is at a restaurant now. One of the nicer ones. I think she seats people. Every one of those sentences started out true. That is what makes a story like that so hard to correct. It is not a lie. It is an old photograph that everyone keeps looking at while the person in it keeps aging. What actually happened is this. I did wait tables at the place on Route 9. I worked doubles there for 3 years, and the owner, a woman named Roberta Nunn, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and called every man under 40 kiddo, taught me how to count inventory. Not how to carry plates. How to count. How to look at a walk-in cooler on Sunday night and know what Tuesday was going to cost. When Roberta got sick in 2016, I ran that restaurant for 11 months while she was in treatment, and I did not tell my family, because at the time I thought I would tell them when it was over and it would be a nice story. Then it was over, and Roberta sold the place, and there was no nice story, just a woman I loved moving to Arizona and a job that ended. But a man named Douglas Rhee had eaten at that restaurant 9 times during those 11 months. He owned 3 properties in the county and was building a 4th. He offered me a job managing the new one before it opened. Not running the floor, opening it. Hiring, sourcing, layout, the whole thing. That was Marchetti's. I opened it in 2018. I hired every person in that building except 2. And in 2021, when Doug restructured the group into 4 locations, he offered me something instead of a raise, and I took it. And that decision is the entire reason this story exists. I own 18% of the company that owns Marchetti's, not the building. The operating company. 18% of 4 restaurants, a catering arm, and a small commissary kitchen on Delancey that makes the bread for all of them. It is not a fortune. Restaurant margins are thin enough to read a newspaper through. But it is real, and it is mine. And it means that when someone eats at Marchetti's, a very small slice of what they spend eventually finds its way to me. I never told my family. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I have had 4 years to sit with it and I still cannot fully explain it. I told myself it was modesty. Then I told myself it was privacy. Then, later, much later, standing in a service hallway on a Friday night in October, I finally understood what it actually was. I was waiting to be asked. There was a Thanksgiving in 2022 that I think about more than I should. We were at my parents' house, 12 of us, and my brother Grant had just been promoted to a regional role at the insurance company he works for. My father asked him about it 4 separate times. Not the same question. 4 different questions. The host holds the book, each one building on the last to someone whose work you consider real. Somewhere between the second and third question, my mother turned to me and asked if I could check the turkey. I checked the turkey. It was fine. I came back and sat down, and the conversation had moved to Grant's territory map, and I listened to my father say the phrase "your numbers" with genuine interest in his voice, and I thought about the fact that 2 weeks earlier I had signed a lease on a commissary kitchen on Delancey Street that would eventually employ 9 people. I did not mention it. I could have. Nobody was stopping me. There was a whole open second where the conversation lulled and I could have said, "I signed a lease this month," and somebody probably would have said, "Oh, for what?" I did not say it, and I went home, and I told my friend Jess on the phone that night that my family did not care about my life, and Jess, who is a good friend and therefore not a comfortable one, said, "Claire, did you tell them any of it?" I said no. She said, "Then what exactly are they supposed to not care about?" I was furious with her for about 3 days. Then I was not, because she was right, and being right is the most irritating thing a friend can do. I had spent my whole life in a family that asked my brother about his job at every single dinner, that asked my sister about her nursing program, that asked me to pass the salt. And somewhere along the way I stopped volunteering and started waiting, the way you wait for a phone to ring when you have decided not to be the one who calls. 4 years of waiting. Nobody ever asked. Dayco I set up in a quiet move. February 2023 was slow. Restaurants have a rhythm, and February is the flat part of the curve. The month where you look at the reservation book and do arithmetic you would rather not do. That was the month my mother called me for the first time in about 6 weeks. And it was to ask a favor. Her book club wanted to do a dinner. 12 women. Could I get them in? And could I maybe do something about the price? Because Dolores was on a fixed income, and my mother did not want anyone feeling embarrassed. I want to be fair to my mother here. That request was not unreasonable. It was actually kind of sweet. She was thinking about Dolores. So I did what any manager does. I set up a house account. If you have never worked in this business, let me explain it plainly, because it becomes important. A friends and family account is a code attached to a name in the point of sale system. When it is applied to a check, the guest pays a reduced amount, usually somewhere between 30 and 50% off, and the difference does not vanish into thin air. It gets logged. It sits in a monthly report called Comps and Voids, and at the end of every quarter, somebody has to look at that report and account for it. That somebody was me. I set the code at 40%. I named it Whitteen Filed F. And because I was in a good mood, and because it was February, and the dining room was half empty anyway, I told my mother it was open to the family, not just the book club. Come in whenever. Just say the name. I did not tell her about the 18%. I did not tell her that the difference came out of a line I personally answered for. I just said, "Come in whenever," and hung up feeling good in a way I had not felt in a while. Because I had finally found a way to be useful to them that did not require anybody to ask me a single question about myself. That is the thing about a gift you keep secret. It cannot be refused, and it cannot be thanked. And after about the 4th or 5th time, it stops being a gift at all. It just becomes weather. Something that is simply how the world works. Of course dinner is cheaper. Dinner has always been cheaper. For 2 years and 8 months, my family ate at Marchetti's on that code. 2 years of Sundaysy. Did not track it while it was happening. I want to be honest about that, because I think there is a version of this story where I am a woman quietly building a case, and that woman would be much more impressive than the woman I actually was. I did not build a case. I just kept working. But the system tracked it, because that is what systems do. Every check, every date, every name typed into the guest field by whichever server rang it in. 2 years and 8 months of dinners sitting in a database waiting. Here is what was in there, in the order I eventually read it, 61 visits. My mother's book club accounted for 9 of them. The other 52 were family, my brother Grant and his wife, Renata alone. 19 visits. They had turned Marchetti's into their anniversary spot, their birthday spot, and eventually their Thursday spot. Renata had a favorite table, which I know because she asked for it by number, which means she had asked enough times to learn the number. My sister Priya. 14 visits, most of them with her friends from the hospital. One of them a bridal shower for a coworker that ran to 22 people and 4 bottles of wine. My father Warren. 8 visits, all of them with men I did not recognize. All of them at lunch, all of them ending with a handshake at the door. My mother, Sylvie. The rest, the total value of the discount, over 2 years and 8 months, was $19,440. $19,000 is not a life-changing amount of money. I want to say that clearly, because I am not going to stand here and pretend I was ruined. I was not ruined. Marchetti's did about $4.5 million in revenue last year, but $19,000 is a car. It is a very good used car. The kind my father told me, for 6 years I could not afford and should not finance. And here is the part that actually got me, the part I did not expect, the part I had to go sit in my own walk-in cooler for a minute over. In 2 years and 8 months and 61 visits, not one of them had ever invited me to sit down. They came to my restaurant 52 times, and they ate and they laughed and they sent back the occasional steak, and they used my name to pay less, and not one single time did anyone text me and say, "Claire, we are here. Come sit with us for 5 minutes." They did not think of it as my restaurant. They thought of it as a place where their daughter worked, and where, because their daughter worked there, things were cheaper. I was not a person to them at that address. I was a coupon. There was one visit I did know about while it was happening, and I have never told anyone this part. It was a Tuesday in July, and I was in the office upstairs, doing the quarterly comps review with Marcus, which is a 2-hour meeting that neither of us enjoys. We were about 40 minutes in when he turned his monitor around and said, "I want to show you something, and I want you to know I have been sitting on it since May." It was the Whitfield line. 14,000 and change at that point. I looked at it for a while. Then I said the thing that managers say, which was, "It is inside our comp budget." "It is," Marcus said. "That is not why I am showing you." He is a very careful person, Marcus. He does not editorialize. So when he does, it lands hard. He said, "Your brother was in on the 9th, 8 people. He asked Danielle whether you were working, and she said yes, you were upstairs, and he said, 'Oh, do not bother her.'" I did not say anything. "Claire, he did not mean it badly," Marcus said. "I do not think any of them mean it badly. I just watched a man decide not to bother his sister and then order the ribeye." Then he turned the monitor back around and we finished the review, and I went home and sat in my car in my own driveway for 11 minutes before I went inside. Do not bother her. That is the whole thing right there, in 4 words. Not cruelty. Not exclusion. Just a small polite decision, made without malice, by a man who had walked into a building his sister built and could not think of a single reason he would want to see her. I did not close the account that July. I want you to know that, because I think it is the most honest part of this story. I looked directly at the evidence and I chose to keep paying, because closing it would have required a conversation. And I had spent 9 years arranging my entire life around not having that conversation. If you have ever paid money to avoid a conversation, you know exactly what that walk from the car to the front door feels like. Priya got engaged in September to a man named Theo Ashford. I liked Theo immediately, which surprised me, because I had prepared not to. He was quiet in a way that was not shy. He asked me a question the first time I met him at a barbecued backyard, and then he waited for the whole answer, and then he asked a second question that proved he had listened to the first one. It had been so long since anyone in that yard had done that to me that I actually lost my place for a second. Theo's parents were Marion and Curtis Ashford. Curtis had built a mechanical contracting company, from a truck and a phone, into something with about 90 employees. Marion had been a school principal for 22 years, and had the specific stillness of a woman who has watched a great many people lie to her. My father lost his mind over them. I do not have a kinder way to put that. From the day Priya brought Theo home, my father began managing an impression. He bought a new jacket. He started saying the firm instead of work. He mentioned Curtis Ashford's company in conversations that had nothing to do with it. And in early October, about 10 days before the engagement dinner, my father asked Curtis Ashford for money. I did not know that at the time. I found out later, and I found out from Theo, which tells you something about Theo. Warren Whitfield's business is called Whitfield Site Services. It does erosion control and silt fencing for construction sites. It had a good run from about 2009 to 2019, and it has been slowly drowning ever since. Mostly because my father refused to buy new equipment and then refused to discuss why he refused. By October, he owed a leasing company about $81,000 and had missed 2 payments. He asked Curtis Ashford to come in as a partner. $60,000 for a share of a company with a negative balance sheet, pitched over coffee as an opportunity. Curtis, who has been in business for 31 years, said what men like Curtis say. He said, "Send me your numbers and let me think about it." He did not say no. That is the thing my father heard. He did not say no. Which meant that by the second Friday in October, my father had one job at that engagement dinner, and it was not celebrating his daughter. It was performing solvency in front of a man who was deciding whether to hand him $60,000. If you have ever watched someone in your family turn a family event into a sales meeting, you already know the feeling in the room before anyone says a word. It is a particular kind of loud. Stay with me, because in about 4 hours my father was going to make the single worst business decision of his life at a table with white linen on it. And he was going to make it on purpose, in front of witnesses, believing it was clever. Hit subscribe so the rest of this finds you. I got to Marchetti's at 6:40 on Friday, October the 11th. I did not go in the front. I have not gone in the front of that building in 7 years. I parked in the back by the grease bin, went through the kitchen door, and stood for a second in the heat and the noise the way I always do, letting it settle over me. Marcus Oyelaran was on the floor that night. Marcus has worked for me since 2019. He is 31, he is unflappable, and he has the rarest quality a floor manager can have, which is that he does not need to be liked. He was standing at the host's stand with the book open, and when he saw me come through the swinging door in a black dress instead of my usual, he did something with his face. I have known Marcus for 6 years. That face was new. "They are already seated," he said. "That is fine. I am early, Claire." He closed the book. "Your father called on Tuesday." I waited. He asked whether the family discount had a ceiling on it. There is a specific quiet that happens in a kitchen doorway when a heat lamp is buzzing about 4 feet from your head. I stood in it. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I would have to check." Marcus looked at me steadily. "I did not check." "I did not want to answer that question until you knew it had been asked." I said thank you. I meant it more than the words could carry. Then I walked out into the dining room, and I saw table 9. Table 9 at Marchetti's is a 9-top that we push to 11 for private parties. It sits in the alcove under the window with the reclaimed glass, and it is the best table in the building. And it is the table I designed the room around in 2018, when the room was still a bare shell, and I was standing in it with a tape measure and a pencil, 11 chairs, 10 of them full. My mother had done the seating. I knew because there were place cards, and the place cards were in her handwriting, and my card was at the far end, on the corner, in the seat nearest the service station, the seat where the server stands to fold napkins. The worst seat at the best table, and on the table already, before I had sat down, was food, not appetizers. The tasting menu. Let me tell you what the Marchetti chef's tasting is, because my family did not know and I want you to. It is 9 courses. It is priced at $240 a person before beverage. It requires 48 hours notice, because the 5th course involves a fish that we bring in specifically. It is not a thing you order at the table. It is a thing you book. My father had booked it, on Tuesday. For 11 people, $2,640 in food, before a single glass of wine. There were already 3 bottles open. 2 of them were the Barolo. I knew the Barolo cost $180 a bottle on our list, because I set that price myself, $3,200 and change, and I had not sat down yet. I stood at the edge of the alcove for about 4 seconds before anyone noticed me, which is the longest I have ever stood unnoticed in my own dining room, and I used those 4 seconds to do the only thing I know how to do, which is count 11 covers. 9 courses committed. 3 bottles open. One of them already upside down in the ice bucket, which meant they had been going since about 6:15, which meant they had arrived 45 minutes early and started without the guest of honor's sister and without me. I counted the empty glasses. I counted the bread service, which had been refilled twice, because I could see 2 different crusts on the board and our bread comes out of the oven on the half hour. And I noticed, because I cannot stop noticing, that the candle at the far end of the table had not been lit. My end, the corner by the service station. Somebody had lit 10 candles and skipped the 11th, and I knew exactly why, because that seat is where the server stands, and an open flame there is a hazard, and it is a rule I wrote myself in 2018. They had seated me in the spot my own safety policy says nobody sits. My sister saw me first. She got up and hugged me, and she was genuinely happy. And I want to be fair to Priya, because Priya is not the villain of this story, and she never was. She was 29 and in love, and she did not know what a tasting menu cost because nobody had told her. And when I looked at her face, I understood that she thought the whole thing was a gift from our parents. "Isn't this incredible?" she said into my shoulder. "Dad went all out." He did. Behind her, at the head of the table, my father raised his glass to me across the room. He did it the way you salute someone across a parking lot. Big, easy, performed for the width of the space. He was wearing the new jacket. I sat in the corner seat, and I did what I have done at every family dinner since I was about 26, which is watch. Marian Ashford was on my left. That was luck, or possibly not luck. She had been placed there, I think, because my mother wanted her away from my father while he worked on Curtis, and my mother had calculated correctly that Marian would be politely bored by me. Marian was not politely bored by me. Within about 10 minutes she had asked me what I did, and I gave her the answer I always give, which is I am in hospitality. And she looked at me over her water glass and said, "That is a very small answer." I laughed. I did not mean to. The courses came. Course 1 at 7:15, course 2 at 7:34. Renata took a photograph of every single plate before anyone was allowed to eat, and my brother Grant explained each dish to the table with real authority, having read the menu card 30 seconds earlier. My father worked Curtis Ashford the entire time. It was not subtle. I have watched a lot of people sell a lot of things across a lot of tables, and my father was doing the thing that amateurs do, which is talk about the size of the opportunity instead of the shape of the risk. He mentioned 3 contracts. 2 of them I knew for a fact had not been signed, because my mother had told me they had not been signed, in a worried phone call in August that she asked me not to repeat. Curtis listened with his hands folded. He asked one question the whole time. He asked what the equipment was worth at auction. My father answered a different question. He talked for 90 seconds about what the equipment had cost new in 2011. I have watched 100 vendors pitch me across a desk, and I can tell you that the moment a man answers the question he wishes you had asked, the meeting is over. Everything after that is politeness. Curtis Ashford knew it at 8:05. My father did not know it at all, and kept selling for another 35 minutes, and I watched Marian watch her husband decide, and I understood that the decision had already been made, and the only thing left was the timing of the letter. Meanwhile Theo, across the table, had figured out something else. Around course 4 he leaned over to me and said, "Can I ask you a restaurant question?" I said sure. He said, "How far ahead do you have to book something like this?" I looked at him. He was not making conversation. He had a napkin in his hand, and he was folding the corner of it over and over, and his eyes were on the wine bottles, not on me. 48 hours, I said. The 5th course has to come in. 48 hours, he repeated. Then he sat back and looked down the table at my father, and I watched a 29-year-old man do the arithmetic that his own future father-in-law had not accounted for, which was that this dinner had been decided on Tuesday, and nobody had told the woman who was going to be asked to pay for it on Friday. Theo did not say anything to anyone. He just refolded the napkin and asked me what the 5th course was, and I told him, and he said it sounded good, and it was. But I have never forgotten that he asked. It was the first time in about 6 years that a member of my extended family had asked me a question about my own work, and then actually done something with the answer. Around course 6, at about 8:40, my father stood up. He tapped a glass with a butter knife. The room turned, the way rooms do, and I watched about 40 strangers at other tables give my family their attention, and I felt the old thing start up in my chest, the small dread that has lived there since I was 19. The one that knows a spotlight in my family has never once turned toward me for a good reason. He talked about Priya for a while. It was fine. It was actually pretty good. He said something about her being the one who chose a job where she has to be kind to strangers, and Priya cried a little, and Theo held her hand, and for about 90 seconds it was a real toast at a real engagement dinner, and I let myself enjoy it. Then he turned toward my end of the table. "And I want to say something about my other daughter," he said. I set down my fork. Claire has always been the practical one, the one who did not need the fuss. And I will tell you, Curtis, when Priya said she wanted to have the dinner here, I said, "Well, we know somebody there." Laughter, the good-natured kind. The kind that only hurts if you are the somebody. So tonight is on Claire, my father said, and he raised his glass toward me, and he smiled, and he said the words that I am going to be hearing for the rest of my life. The successful one is paying. Least she can do for her sister, right? I want to describe the next 4 seconds accurately, because they were the 4 seconds that mattered. The table laughed. Not cruelly. That is what I need you to understand. Grant laughed. Renata laughed. My mother laughed and put her hand on Curtis Ashford's arm and said something like, "He is terrible," in the voice of a woman doing damage control on a joke she had approved in advance. Priya did not laugh. Priya looked at me, and then she looked at the table, and I watched my little sister do the arithmetic for the first time in her life. 9 courses, 11 people. 3 bottles. Her face changed color, and Marian Ashford, on my left, went completely still. Not shocked. Still. The stillness of a principal who has just heard a student say something that will require a phone call. She turned her head about 10 degrees and looked at me, and she said quietly, under the noise, only to me, "Did you know about this?" And I said no. She nodded once and picked up her water. That was the moment I decided. Not out of rage. I want to be clear about that too, because there was no rage available to me. Rage requires surprise, and I was not surprised. I had been sitting at that table for 34 years. What I felt was something much quieter and much more final. It was the feeling of a door that you have been holding open with your foot for a very long time, and your leg is tired, and you simply stop holding it. I put my napkin on the table and I said, to nobody in particular, "Excuse me a second." 4 words to Marcusi did not go to the bathroom. I went to the service station at the back of the dining room, the one about 15 feet behind my own chair, where Marcus was standing with a stack of dessert plates and an expression that told me he had heard every word. If you have ever stood up from a table where everyone expected you to fold, and did not fold, you already know what my hands were doing. They were completely steady. That is what surprised me most. 12 years of carrying plates through a dinner rush had given me hands that do not shake when a room is watching, and I had never once thought of that as a gift until that exact moment. Take a breath here with me, because what happens next took 9 minutes, and I have replayed it about 400 times. If a quiet boundary has ever changed your whole life, subscribe and stay with me to the end of this one. You will want to see where it lands. I said 4 words to Marcus. Run the full ledger. That is all, 4 words, and Marcus knew exactly what I meant, because Marcus had been the one who flagged the comps report to me in July and asked, carefully, whether I wanted to talk about the Whitfield line. Here is what the full ledger means, and why it was not a trick, and why nobody could argue with it afterward. Every house account at Marchetti's produces a statement. It is not a punishment, and it is not a weapon. It is an accounting document that exists because the state of our incorporation requires us to substantiate comped revenue, and because our own auditor requires it every quarter. Any guest on a house account can request their statement at any time. Most never do. It lists every visit, date, party size, server, gross check, discount applied, net paid. And at the bottom it lists the cumulative discount, and next to that, the name of the account holder responsible for it. Marcus went to the terminal. I stood at the service station and folded 4 napkins, because my hands wanted something to do, and because I have folded about 100,000 napkins in my life, and it is what I do when I am thinking. Then I walked back to table 9 and sat down in the worst seat and ate my 6th course. At 8:58, my father asked for the check. He did it loudly. He did it with a little writing gesture in the air toward Marcus. And he did it while looking at Curtis Ashford, which is the detail I have never been able to shake, because it meant he had planned the moment. He was not asking for a bill. He was staging a scene in which a man of means summons a check, and his daughter quietly covers it, and the whole thing looks like a family with so much money that it does not need to discuss money. Marcus came to the table with a leather check presenter and a second folded document. He did not bring them to me. He set them both down in front of my father, which is correct because my father made the reservation and my father's name was on the book. Marcus is very good at his job. He did not perform a single thing. "Sir," he said, "your check, and your account statement since the discount was applied." My father opened the presenter first. I watched his face. $3,218 before the discount. After the 40%, $930. He smiled. He actually smiled, because $1,900 was survivable and the discount had worked, and the scene was going to hold. Then he opened the second document. The ledger there is a particular silence that a piece of paper can make at a table of 11 people. It is not dramatic. It is just that one person stops making noise and then the person next to them notices, and it travels outward like a ring in water. My father read the first page for a long time, 61 visits, 2 years, 8 months, every date, every name. $19,440 in cumulative discount. And at the bottom, in a line the software generates automatically and cannot be edited because I built the controls that make it that way. Account. Wit. Fault responsible party. C. Partner. My mother reached over and took the page out of his hands. She read it. She looked at me down the length of the table, and she said the thing that told me everything about the last 20 years. She said, "Claire, what is this? Not, is this true?" Not, I did not know. She said, "What is this?" in the voice of a woman who has found a receipt in a coat pocket and would like to be told a comfortable story about it. I said, "It is our account statement." Grant said, "Partner in what?" And I said the sentence I had been not saying for 4 years. "I own 18% of the company that owns this restaurant, and the other 3. I opened this one in 2018. Renata laughed. It was reflex, not malice. She said, "Wait, you are serious?" "I am serious." "But you seat people," my mother said. "I seat people sometimes," I said. "It is my dining room. I like to see it full." Curtis Ashford put down his glass. I want to tell you what he said, because it was 11 words, and it did more damage than anything I could have said myself. He looked at the statement, and then he looked at my father, and he said, "Warren, whose money have you been spending for 3 years?" My father said my name. Just my name, Claire. The way you would say it to stop someone from doing something. And then, because he could not help himself, because the scene was collapsing, and he reached for the only tool he has ever had, he said, "This is a family thing. It is between us. There is no need to make a production." Marian Ashford said, "You made the production, Warren." She said it kindly. That was the terrible part. She said it the way you tell a child that the thing they broke was already broken. I did not raise my voice. I never do. I have thought a great deal about why, and I think it is because I learned very young that in my family, volume was a currency my father had cornered, and I was never going to outspend him with it. So I said, at a normal speaking volume, in the seat by the service station, "Dad, I am not going to argue with you at Priya's dinner, but I am going to say one true thing, and then I am going to eat dessert." The table waited. "For 2 years and 8 months, I have paid for you to eat here, and none of you have ever once asked me to sit down. 52 visits, not one invitation. Tonight you booked my restaurant, seated me at the service station, and announced to my sister's future in-laws that I would be covering a bill you ordered without telling me." I paused. "I am not angry that you used the account. I set it up, I meant it. I am telling you that I set it up because I wanted to be part of something, and instead I became a line item. That is not your fault, exactly. I never told you what I was. But you never asked, and I am done waiting." My father said, "So you are cutting us off." And here is where I surprised myself because I had not planned this part. I said, "No," I said, "the account stays open. Priya, it stays open for your wedding events, and I will do them at cost, and I mean that. Mom, your book club keeps it. Grant, you and Renata keep it." Grant looked at me like I had spoken a foreign language. "But it is going to have my name said out loud on it from now on," I said. "When you come here, you are eating at my table, not at a discount, at my table. If that feels different to you, that is the only thing I am actually asking for." Then I ate the 7th course, which was a duck breast with a burnt honey glaze, that I had personally tasted 11 times in development in 2018, and it was very good, and I sat in the worst seat at the best table in my own restaurant, and I was, for the first time in about 15 years at a family dinner, completely relaxed. What it cost? What it bought here is what happened after, because I think you deserve the real ending and not the satisfying one. My father paid the check, all $1,930 of it. He did it with a card that I later learned had about $400 of room on it, and the transaction went through, and I have never asked how Curtis Ashford did not invest in Whitfield Site Services. He sent my father a short email 11 days later. Theo showed me one line of it with Curtis's permission, and the line was, "I have decided the fit is not right, and I would rather stay family than become a creditor." That is a very gracious way to say no. It is also the most expensive sentence my father has ever been handed, and he was handed it because he could not resist a toast. Warren Whitfield sold 2 trucks in December. The company still exists. It is smaller. He is 62 and he is working in the field again instead of the office, and my mother told me on the phone in January that he comes home tired in a way she has not seen since the 90s. She said it like an accusation. I let it be one. I did not apologize. My mother and I are not fixed. We talk about once a month. She has never once said the word sorry, and I have stopped expecting it. And I have found that expecting it was most of the pain. Priya and I are better than we have ever been. She called me the next morning at 7 and cried. And the first thing she said was not, I did not know, it was I should have known, which is a much harder sentence to say, and the reason I love her. She got married in April. We did the reception at the commissary on Delancey, with long tables and folding chairs and my own bread, and it was the best event I have ever run in my life, and I did not charge her a cent, and I told everyone in the room exactly whose kitchen they were standing in. Grant and Renata still come to Marchetti's. About once every 6 weeks. They use the account, and every single time, without fail, Renata texts me from the parking lot before they walk in, and it just says, "We are here, come sit." She started doing it on her own. Nobody asked her to. It took her about 3 visits to figure out that it was the whole point, the way the host holds the book, which is more than I can say for anyone else in that family. And it is why I have quietly stopped thinking of her as my brother's wife, and started thinking of her as mine. I have thought a lot about the $19,000. Whether I should have said something at year 1 instead of year 3. I do not think the money was ever the problem. I think the problem was that I built something good, and then I hid it, and I told myself that hiding it was humility, when it was actually a test. I was testing whether they would notice me without being told. And the thing about a test you never tell anyone they are taking is that nobody can pass it, and then you get to be quietly disappointed forever, and call it their fault. That is the part I own. I set the trap and then I sat in it for 4 years. Here is what I would tell you. If you are the one in your family who fixes things and pays for things and gets seated by the service station, generosity that hides itself does not stay generosity. It turns into weather. And weather does not get thanked, it just gets expected, and then one day somebody stands up at a dinner and jokes about the rain, say what you are, out loud, in a normal voice, at a normal volume, before somebody makes you say it in front of an audience. You are allowed to be a partner in your own life, and to have people know it, and if a boundary ever feels too quiet to count, I promise you it is not. I did not raise my voice once that night. I said 4 words to a man holding dessert plates, and it was enough. That is my story. 11 chairs, 9 courses, and a statement that had been sitting in a database the entire time, waiting for somebody to ask for it. If you have ever been the family's coupon, hear me. Helping is a choice, not a debt, and a person who has to guess your worth will always guess low. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you at the table.